So in this particular session, we will start with our understanding of 5G overview. We will talk about 1 second. So we are going to talk about 5G overview, and then we will see how we are progressing towards 6G. As you see, if you see LinkedIn or many news pieces today, everyone is talking about that 5G is already gone. We are already, on the way of 6G, but those things are not very much correct. We will also talk about it. Somebody was asking, are we going to talk about radio network, core network, and other things in 5G? Yes, at a high level. This is a very, very generic kind of session. We will not get into the detailed technical concepts, but yes, we will discuss, understand how this 5G industry looks like, what are the things changing with the advent of 5G compared to the 4G kind of network. And we will also see what are the progression we are seeing towards the 6G kind of network. Now, the agenda for this session is the evolution to 5G, right? So what are the things, how we had in the previous generation of network, how we are moving towards 5G network, and how these 5G networks are different from the previous generations of network. As we all see nowadays, there are a lot of hype around Docker, Kubernetes, cloud native, containerization, virtualization. We will also see that how cloud is intervening in the 5G networks, right? We have seen different kind of network deployments for 2G networks, 3G networks, and 4G networks. Now we are going to talk about the next generation deployments, how the deployments are going to change over the period of time. Right. What are the way forward to 6G, and what are the different type of job opportunities which are available in 5G kind of network? So let's get started. Few points to note before we get started. This is an open session. We may not get into the deep technical concepts. You may have all the time. You may have a lot of questions, right? But we may not be able to entertain all those questions. But yes, we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. Your mic will be muted on all the times. If you have any questions, you can raise your hands and Karthikeyan will help me to take those questions. If you have any other questions, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box during the session. We will have question and answer at the end of the session. We will be uploading this on our YouTube channel, and link will be shared with all the participants. And if you need any further information, please visit www.skill-link.com. Right. This is about me. I'm working as a director telecom with Skill-Lync. Previous companies I've worked with Lanizo Global, NanoCell Networks. I'm sure many of you are already connected to me on LinkedIn and have attended some of my past sessions with my previous company. Right. In addition to this, I've worked with companies like HFCL, Reliance, Hutchison SR, Ericsson, Nokia, and a training company in Finland named as Refcon. Started working with networks like wireline network, then moved on to 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, transmission, IP, core, VAS, as well as cloud. I worked with variety of different products, the telecom products, Samsung, Nokia, Ericsson, ZTE, and Cisco. I was an AWS authorized instructor and AWS certified solution architect. Having 20 years of work experience, out of that 15 years of training experience, I've trained people in more than 50 plus countries, right? Now, why to learn 5G? Many of you have questions. Okay, what is new with 5G? Why do we want to learn 5G? So as we see today, telecom companies are struggling to hire people. There will be almost 1 million jobs available in the next 2 to 3 years. And that will require a completely new set of skills which were required compared to which were required in the previous generation of network. India, for that matter, will need around 22 million skilled people for 5G rollouts. Companies are really struggling to hire people with these new age skills, which includes cloud, RESTful APIs, cloud native, Docker, Kubernetes, microservices, development. So companies are very much struggling to hire these people, right? There is a clear skill industry gap in telecom, even for experienced people. I speak with a lot of people with 10 to 15 years experience, and many of those people are not even aware about the fundamentals, what are required in 5G. The industry is growing at a fast pace. And if you look at the comparative previous generation, the 4G network, typically the telecom was created all in silos. What difference 5G is going to create is 5G is going to integrate with each and every industry. We have a lot of vertical industry standards for 5G. We have a lot of use cases for 5G. We are having cloud intervention, softwareized networks. So nowadays networks are open for software developers as well. So a lot of things are being integrated with almost each and every industry is impacted by the invention of 5G. Of course, it brings a huge US dollar opportunity to various companies. And as per some estimates from Economic Times, it says around 30 billion USD opportunity for IT companies. Now, if you look at a report from the Forbes, which says top 10 tech trends, which is going to transform the world, you will see a lot of different trends here. And you may ask, hey, I don't see 5G anywhere. You don't see 5G in this picture, right? So why we are talking about 5G? Ubiquitous computing, connected and smart everything, the datafication of our world, artificial intelligence, extended reality. Believe me, when I say this, all these trends are not possible with the bigger data pipes, which are possible only with 5G. So 5G, without 5G, most of these use cases, most of these technical trends will not even work. So 5G, the wireless network, the huge or thick data pipes are going to change the way, we look at the use cases, we look at the tech trends. And I hope we have, explored this with 4G as well. The way we used to consume data few years back, maybe 7-8 years back, and the way we use data today are entirely different, right? So we can see that the things are changing, and with 5G, it is going to change with a different pace altogether. We will talk about all these things. Now, evolution to 5G network, how these 5G network have evolved, and we have seen different kind of releases, which are called as 3GPP releases. Instead of getting into these releases, right, we will just see, just like we have software upgrades for Android, software upgrades for our Apple, Mac, or Windows, we also had software upgrades, or I'll say 3GPP releases for our wireless network. So we started with release 4, release 3, which was also called as release 99. And we had variety of different releases. And today we are having release 15 for 5G. Release 16 is already freezed. Release 17 is work in progress. And release 18 will be called as, release 17 is already work in progress. Release 18 will be named as 5G advanced. So we have, instead of getting into all these details, so these are the different features which are introduced by every release. So release 8, we had 4G. Release 15, we have 5G. Release 18 will be called as 5G advanced. We will not get into the details of all these features and functions which are shown here. So these are the releases, basically tells you upgrades which are happening in the wireless network. So we are already sitting at release 16, which is the 5G phase 2. Release 17 is work in progress. Release 18 will be launched as 5G advanced, right? So we see that with every release, there are a lot of new features and functionality which are being introduced, a lot of new use cases which are being introduced, and we will talk about some of these use cases when we talk about 5G. Now, how 5G is different than the previous generation? How 5G is different than the previous generation? If we look at 2G or 3G network, they were majorly targeting voice as a use case, but some data. We had some data rate, which were, good for nothing. You can just do some basic thing, downloading some wallpaper, watching some MMS. That's all what you can do, right? 4G gave us the real power with broadband wireless access, where we were able to achieve data rates of 10 to 100 Mbps. One question I normally get here, people say that, hey, 4G is designed to give 1 Gbps data rate, but we are not getting it. We are getting just 10 to 100 Mbps. So that 1 Gbps data rate is not the data rate which can be experienced by the end user. This is the data rate which is the peak data rate of the network. Just like that, the peak data rate for 5G is 20 Gbps. The peak data rate of 5G is 20 Gbps, 20 times of 4G network. So it is going to give us much faster data rate, and that is not the user experience data rate. User will get somewhere around 100 to 300 Mbps kind of data rate with 5G. But data rate is not the only thing what we are going to look at in 5G network. The 5G network enables a lot of new use cases, which includes EMBB, which is more about data rates only. We have something called as URLLC, ultra reliable low latency communication. And we have something called as MMTC, massive machine type communication. So what does that mean? If we see that in last generation, we have seen exponential growth in the subscriber count, the number of subscribers. So we had exponential growth in the number of subscribers. But this number is now more or less saturated. Now, all of us either have one or two mobile phone, or we have one or two SIM cards, right? Now, if we want to again have exponential growth in the number of subscriber, it is not going to happen, because when we bring in 5G, most of my 4G users are going to migrate to 5G. So I will not have any new subscribers. So it may increase the subscriber of 5G, but at the same time, it is going to reduce the number of subscriber for 4G. So that is not something which can give you more revenues. So from where we can have this exponential growth, and this exponential growth can come from devices. Lot of new devices has to be connected to the network. Lot of new devices has to be connected to the network. And that can happen when we bring in the new use cases, which will enable devices to communicate with the network. And that is something what we are doing with MMTC, URLLC, coming up with the use cases. And if you know, every IoT use case has a different requirement. So we need to treat all these use cases, all these different kind of IoT use cases in different method, different KPIs, different delays, and all those things has to be managed by the 5G network. That's not all. We also have some more differences. Till 4G network, mostly our networks were deployed with purpose-built hardware and purpose-built softwares, right? So we used to have tighter integration between hardware and software. Now, operators are not happy with that. They want to disaggregate the hardware and software. So, for example, you buy some equipments from Ericsson or Nokia, or for Samsung for that matter, you need to get the hardware and software package from the same company. But now company says, hey, I don't want to do it. I want to build a huge data center at my own. And on top of that, I want to deploy some of the applications. These applications can be EPC, MME, HSS, can be 5G core, the different components of 5G core as we see further, or these applications can be any internet related application. So they don't want to have specific hardware, specific software for one particular application. They want to have a generic COTS hardware, as we call it, a customized off the shelf hardware for a variety of different applications, and that can host all these things. So we are moving from purpose-built hardware to different kind of architecture, which is typically a generic hardware. On top of that, we have a layer of virtualization or containerization. Now, we also see that there are a lot of companies who are making money from internet. Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, Instagram, and a number of other applications, right? Now, they are minting money by utilizing the power of the telecom network. Now, even telecom networks want to utilize that by providing these capabilities to the third-party servers. So now 4G resources, 5G resources, in 4G, we used to call it a SCEF, Service Capability Exposure Function. In 5G, we call it as NEF, Network Exposure Function. That means the capability of your networks can be exploited, can be exposed to the third-party servers, which can give you value-added services, which can provide value-added services to the end user. So in many these concepts, 5G is going to be very different than the previous generation. And talking about these use cases, so we have a lot of use cases coming up with URLLC, ultra reliable low latency communication. We have a lot of use cases coming with the EMBB, MMTC, etc. Now, if we see this, all these use cases are having very, very different key performance identifier requirements. Their KPI requirements are very different. Just to take an example, here we need the data rates of 20 Gbps. But here we need connection density of 1 million subscriber per square kilometer with a battery life of 10 years. Here we are looking for latencies as low as 1 millisecond and reliability as high as 99.9%. Now, achieving all these things in one physical network is not going to be easy. And to support that, we have come up with a new functionality in 5G network, which was not there in any previous generation of network. Can you help me to name that functionality? What is the new function to support variety of different services? What are the different variety of different services in 5G? Right, perfect. Network slicing. 1 second. So that is called as network slicing. That is called as network slicing. That means your one physical network can be broken down to multiple logical network. One network slice for URLLC, another network slice for EMBB, another network slice for MMTC, and there can be hundreds of other slices can be. You can create one network slice for IPL match. You can create another network slice for FIFA World Cup. You can create another network slice for police or ambulance network, right? So I can ideally create a network slice for any different type of network. Now, is it possible to create all these network slices manually? Of course not. You cannot create all these network slices manually. Some of the features and functions can be defined manually, but overall it has to be automated. And that's where orchestration becomes very important. That's where orchestration becomes very important. Now, so we have to have a lot of automation in the network, a lot of software defined network, software controlled network, and that is what is there in 5G. This was completely missing, or I'll say at a very, very naive stage, it was there in the previous generation network. 5G is going to do it way more different than the previous generation used to do it. Now, if you look at the network architecture of 5G, we call it as service-based architecture. We will be coming up with a series where we will talk about all these network functions one by one. But just to give an example, instead of getting into too many details here, the UE remains as it is. No different. Same mobile, same SIM card with new capabilities. The base station remains as it is. Earlier in 4G, it was called as E node B. And now we call it G node B. Architecture wise, okay, it will be broken down to multiple pieces called as CU, DU, RU when we talk about something called as Open RAN, which we are not going to discuss this pretty much in detail here, but we will discuss in some future videos. But this architecture wise, E node B is replaced by G node B. But if you look at the core network architecture compared to the previous generation, it is way more different. Now, the basic difference in the previous generation and in this generation is all these boxes, what you see in the 4G, something similar to this, they were all hardware boxes. However, in case of 5G, they are all created by using some kind of cloud. And that's where we use some kind of virtualized environment or some kind of containerized environment, some virtualization, some containerization kind of environments. And all these things, they are communicating with a protocol, which is typically HTTP2 kind of protocol with the RESTful API-based communication. So if you look at all these things are pretty much new to the telecom world. The IT networks, IT world used to have all these things, HTTP2 protocol, RESTful API-based communication, and a number of YAML files, JSON files. All these things are completely new to telecom world. And if you want to stay relevant in the telecom world, even if you are an experienced person, even though you're working with 2G, 3G, 4G network from last 10 years, you will not be able to sustain in your career or grow in your career unless you learn these things, at least at the high level. At least at the high level, you should know all these things, what cloud is, what Docker, what Kubernetes, what containerization, what virtualization, and what are these RESTful API-based communication. You should know all these things. Without knowing all these things, you will not be able to stay relevant in the telecom world. This comes up with the biggest opportunity for the freshers. Now, when college freshers come in, they have good understanding about all these protocols. They have studied it. For them, it will be very easy to excel into these skills and get new age jobs in the telecom world. And down the line 5 years, we may not see any different industry for telecom. Telecom may completely merge into 5G kind of network, IT kind of network or cloud kind of network, right? Now, what is the cloud intervention in telecom or 5G network? Let us try to understand why cloud. So what are the benefits with the cloud? One first thing what comes to our mind is called as pay as you go. So you need not to design your network, or else define the capacities of your network on the day one. What does that mean? Let me give an example. I used to work with Ericsson and used to manage Airtel network. In any of the given time, 31st December, which is again another 30 days, 27 days away from us, New Year, between 12 to 1, we used to have the maximum traffic in the network. The maximum traffic for the last 1 year, not the next year can be even higher, but for the last 1 year, this used to be a time when we used to have maximum traffic in the network. Now, we used to design this network at least 6 months in advance, because we have to design our network on for 31st December, but we have to start the planning 6 months before, because we need to procure the hardware, we need to configure the software, and lot of other logistics which are required. So this traffic goes like this on the 31st December, and it comes like this, right? So after that, most of your capacities are unused and you pay for that. So to avoid that, we are moving towards cloud data center. So you can increase, you can decrease the capacity as and when you want it. We typically call it as scalability. The cloud resources are scalable. Cloud resources are like, can be increased, can be decreased as and when you want it. So when you need more capacity, I will give you more resources. When you need less capacity, I will give you less resources, and this can keep on changing according to the demand of the network. And the remaining capacity you can use for some other services other than the wireless network. So what are those services? Now operators are also providing those cloud services to their enterprise customers. So a lot of things which are changing, and in future, all the 5G networks, not only core network, but even the radio networks, we have, I'm sure many of you have heard about something called a CRAN, Cloud RAN. Many of these things. So Vikas, we'll take your question after some time. So CRAN or Cloud RAN is something where some components of your radio access network will be deployed in the cloud environment. So we will be having, Docker, Kubernetes kind of things, even in the radio network. The core network anyway is going to be completely based on the cloud native architecture. So this is again a new word for telecom called as cloud native. What is cloud native? Where we have a lot of different things called as containers. What is containerization? What is virtualization? So we are going to discuss in some future sessions. But these containers are created by Docker, and they are orchestrated by something called as Kubernetes. These are very, very common terms nowadays in the telecom world. And these containers are used to host your microservices. What is microservices? We used to create our softwares with a monolithic softwares, and now we want to break down those monolithic softwares into some kind of smaller services, smaller piece of, just to keep it simple, we are just converting them into the smaller piece of code, smaller piece of services, and those things are called as microservices. Those things are called as microservices, and a collection of microservices are called as network function. We call them as cloud native network function. Earlier, we used to call them as VNF. Now we call them as cloud native network functions. However, somewhere, just to understand it in easy way, we call it as containerized network function. What I'm trying to convey here is all the future networks are not going to be based on some specific hardware. They are going to deploy it on some kind of generic hardware called as COTS hardware in the virtualized format, in the containerized format. So the whole telecom infrastructure is moving towards cloud infrastructure. Now, with this, this word was completely alien to us few years back. In 5 years back, right, nobody used to talk about DevOps in 5G, in telecom. DevOps was something which was related to software development, software operations, software testing. However, today you cannot live without it in the 5G world. In 5G, you want to sustain, you want to run your operation, you have to have. Recently, there is a company called Dish Wireless in US. They have opened up their 5G network to the developers. And when we are talking about opening up these networks, this will also bring in a lot of security challenges. So I'm sure many of you have heard that there are one of the largest hospital in India is under cyber attack from last few days. in maybe 3 years, maybe 3 months down the line, there are chances one of the biggest mobile network operator is again at the mercy of hackers. So we need to have the cyber security, telecom security. These are some topics which can give you a very, very good career in next 5-10 years, right? So security is another area. DevOps, telecom DevOps is another area. Nowadays, we also talk about SecOps, security operations, right? All these things are the trends which are going to change the way the career used to look like. And they're also opening up these networks for the developers. So developers can write the applications for telecom networks. So a lot of things are happening on the DevOps front, on the SecOps front, and cyber security is one of the largest growing field in the telecom networks today. Now, how the next generation deployments will look like, right? Now, in this discussion, I'm coming up with some kind of pictures from a company called Netmanias. They talk about the traditional MNOs. They talk about, the next generation MNOs. MNO, when I say MNO, we typically call as mobile network operator. We call them as a mobile network operator, and we will understand what are the different type of deployment we have for the next generation of networks. Now, traditional 5G mobile network operator. So what we used to do is we used to have some kind of central cloud where we used to deploy our 5G core network. And then we had edge cloud where we used to deploy our radio networks. And all these radio networks used to come with purpose-built hardware. What does that mean? That means this whole hardware and software comes from the companies like Huawei, Ericsson, and Nokia. So basically what we are getting here is we are actually having this complete. So this work can come from some different company, but this whole stuff, hardware as well as software, should come from the same company. So that means the operator is at the mercy of these companies who are providing these equipment. They cannot introduce new hardware, new software without changing the vendor, or they cannot change the vendor without replacing their hardware and software. So this is not good operator. So it was like that when you have Airtel, when you have 2G network, when you want to deploy 3G network, the company will come with a all new set of hardware, all new set of software. When you want to have 4G, again, new hardware, new software. So the previous generation of hardware gets of no use, right? Now companies want to make it virtualized. Make it virtualized and deploy it on something called as COD server, commercial off-the-shelf server. And that's what we are doing in the Rakuten deployment. Rakuten is one of the company, one of the operator in Japan. What they did was they had got COD server, which is more about the 5G core deployment by using NFVI, but all the radio network server also, they can be deployed on COD servers. Tomorrow, when you want to move from one generation to another generation, you need not to change the hardware, you just need to change the software, right? And you can also get the leverage of something called as MEC. MEC is called as multi-access edge computing. MEC is called as multi-access edge computing. That means you can deploy some of the applications closer to the user so that you can get better throughputs, you can get better capabilities, or better, latencies for that matter, right? So it also gives you benefit of deploying some of the applications closer to the end user, which is called as multi-access edge computing, But again, if you want to deploy this kind of network like Rakuten, you need to spend a lot of money on buying these hardwares. Right. So it is like when I want to launch a website, somebody says, hey, you have to buy a server and you have to manage that server at your own. But that's not possible for the new entrants. So if there is a new operator coming in and they don't have deep pockets, for example, let's take an example of Indian market. So we have got a new entrant. I'm not saying they are going as of now full-fledged operator, but let's say they want to launch their 5G services. And if they have to compete with companies like Airtel, companies like Jio, company like VI, it will not be easy for them to do it, right? Because again, they have to spend huge money on the infrastructure. Now, what they can do is instead of deploying all these services on their own data. Of course, Adani have, this is just a hypothetical example. So Adani have their own data centers as well. But instead of using that, what they can do is they can have the complete deployment on some public cloud infrastructure. And that's where we talk about Dish Wireless. That's where we talk about Dish Wireless. Dish Wireless is one of the largest, fourth largest operator in US. And now they are deploying their complete workloads on the AWS infrastructure. Now, so core network, you understand, okay, it may be a big data center. So they may have some edge data centers. Now, how do we really come closer to the end user? How you can support the radio networks, transmitter, receivers, which are closer to the end user, how you can support it by AWS. Now, for that also, AWS has come with a solution, and that is a server rack enabled by AWS called as AWS Outpost. So AWS Outpost is one of the server rack which is supported, which is provided by AWS, which can give you all the compute, all the storage, all the networking. At the same time, it is enabled by all the AWS services. This can be connected to some base stations, can be used as some base station, can be used as G-Node-B, can be used as some user plane function, can be used as some kind of applications which are multi-SSH computing. So this is how the networks are changing. This is how the network is changing. So tomorrow, the next base station, which used to be from Ericsson and Nokia, the hardware may come from AWS as well. Hardware may come from Google. Hardware may come from Microsoft. So if you see this, we are going back to the square one. So initially, AWS started by saying that, hey, why you want to buy servers? You put everything on the cloud, and now they are selling servers, which are typically called as on-prem servers. They're typically called as on-prem servers. They are providing these servers, which can be used by some local equipments by mobile network operator. This is how the things are changing in the telecom world. Now, there are a lot of hype around, saying that, hey, 5G is dead. Let's talk 6G. Now, many of you say that, okay, so 5G is yet to come, right? So we are yet to get the benefits of 5G. The operator are yet to earn money from 5G. Is 5G dead? The answer is no. Even though people have the industry bodies, some kind of standardization body has started talking about 6G, the best of 5G is yet to come. Until unless 5G is successful, there will be no successful 6G, in keeping it short. So we have a lot of different use cases. We have huge investments going on in 5G. If operators are not able to earn profits from those investments, there will be no courage with the operators to move to 6G. And we are yet to talk about the standardization of 6G. As of now, we are talking about release 18, which will come in again next 1 or 2 years. That itself is referred as 5G advanced. That is for sure that 5G is going through its own evolution. That will happen for sure. But there is little time to move to 6G. Little time to move to 6G. So we are yet to see the best of 5G. We are yet to see what is going to happen in 5G. Lot of use cases has to be implemented, lot of service verticals. Nowadays, we talk about something called as private networks. There is a lot of hype around private networks in 5G. Now, what is a private network? Have you ever used it? So private network, they are considering these private network as a, some different kind of initiative, that this is something which has never happened. But I don't really agree with that. I may be wrong, but I'm not agreeing with that. So we have seen our private network long back, even in wireline network. Even in wireline network, when we used to go to, let's say, some hotel, we used to go to some office, we used to see something called as PBX, private branch exchange. We used to have something called as private branch exchanges, right? Now, when I talk about these PBX or private branch exchange, they typically used to be of two types. One was only for internal communication. That means by using this PBX, you can speak only within the office or only within the hotel. But there are some other branch exchanges which can be used for internal as well as external communication. So what we used to do is, for internal communication, we used to dial a short code, right? But for external communication, we used to dial 0, and once we dial 0, typically it connects us to the external network, and then we can dial some number which is relevant for some external subscribers. The same goes true with the 5G private networks as well. We have some kind of network which are only pure private networks. We typically call it NPN, non-public networks. We typically call this as NPN, non-public networks. And then we have PNI NPN, public network integrated NPN. That means they can actually connect to public network. They can be offloaded to public network. So this concept more or less the same. However, the service requirements have changed. Now, at that time, PBXs were designed only for the voice services. They were majorly designed for voice services. But now we are giving a lot of different services: voice, instant messaging, video calls, and n number of other applications over these private networks. And because these private networks are managed by a particular company or an organization, they can be customized. They can be customized to suit the requirement of the end user. They can be customized to suit the requirement of the end user. So basically, the private network concept, which is very important. So at the same time, it is very important for the success of 5G. Until unless we see a lot of, because retail users, the end users are already saturated. We need to bring in a lot of new use cases, lot of new customers to the telecom networks if you want to make it success. And that can happen only when we have different kind of users, different kind of use cases integrating to wireless network, and then only we will be able to see the success of 5G. Is it going to happen tomorrow? The answer is no. It is going to take time. Next 5 years, even 4G networks are here to stay. 2G and 3G networks are slowly going to get obsolete, but 4G and 5G is here to stay for another 5 years at least. 5G can be maybe another 10 years, right? But it will require a lot of these use cases to be successful, and then only the 5G will reap its benefits. Now, what are the things we are expecting in 6G? Now, because we have already started talking about 6G, so let's talk about 6G. What are the things we are expecting in 6G? In case of 5G, we are integrating a lot of different networks. We are integrating wireline network, wireless network, Wi-Fi network, and we are putting all these networks together and providing a seamless coverage. We are talking about some kind of unlicensed band, where we are talking about providing 5G services called as new radio on the unlicensed bands as well. However, in 6G, what they're going to get is the convergence of different type of network: satellite network, UAV means drone based network, unmanned aerial vehicle kind of networks, terrestrial network, which are the networks which we are already using, and maritime network, the sea based network. All these networks will converge and provide some kind of global coverage. Will it happen? Will it not happen? I'm not sure about it, but that's what they are thinking of. As of now, mostly till 2G, 3G, 4G, we have used bands which are below 6 gigahertz. We typically name it as FR1 in 5G, frequency range 1, right? In 5G, we have got another band which is called as FR2, called as millimeter wave, which is available only for a very, very short distance, which is in the range of 24 to 100 gigahertz band. Can give you very, very low coverage, very, very small coverage area. But that's what we have experimented in 4G and 5G. So in 5G, we have got FR1 and FR2, but below that, before that, 2G, 3G, 4G, we used to have mostly below 6 gigahertz kind of bandwidth. Now, in 6G, they are also experimenting with higher gigahertz, terahertz. optical waves. So there are new spectrum which will be introduced in the 5G kind of thing. This is not the first time we are doing it. We also tried with something called as Li-Fi. Li-Fi was, the internet based on some kind of light waves. We had some standards based on that, but I'm not expert into those areas, so I can't really comment it. But we want to try some of these waves in futures as well. Networks, as I mentioned earlier, getting more open, and more openness will give you more security threats. So your networks are more vulnerable to attacks. So you have to have security at various layers. You need the security at physical layer. You need the security as network layer. You need the security at application layer as well. And in case of 5G, in case of future generation network, we call it as a zero trust security. Don't trust anyone. Zero trust security. So I don't trust anyone. So every application, every user, every external network will not be trusted, and they have to prove themselves before they get access to the resources of our network. And this is going to grow even with 6G. Of course, the AI, ML, and the data, big data is becoming very important even in 4G. So even in 4G, 5G, now it is going to be way more bigger in the 6G kind of network. And that's where we talk about a lot of stuff related to, okay, just to take an example, in 5G, we have got a new network function called as NWDAF. NW network, DAF is data analytics function. So we have a dedicated function in the 5G network, which is called as network data analytics function. So that means this is collecting a lot of information from all the network functions, and all these network functions are, all the data will be used to create some insights, to provide some different decision making for the future operations of the network. So a lot of AI, ML, big data, a lot of data analytics, a lot of deep learning, all these things are going to power the network of the futures. Right. Now, what kind of jobs we have in telecom? Unlike the previous generation, where you used to know telecom, where you used to know some kind of wireless network, 2G, 3G, 4G, that is not sufficient for getting jobs in the next generation. In 5G, you should know telecom. You should also know cloud. You should also know something related to, let's say, AI, ML, at least at a high level. And as softwares are becoming more networks are becoming more programmable, sometimes you need programming skills like C, C++, Python, etc. Right. So nowadays, to get a land in telecom, and one misconception what people have. People say, okay, whenever they talk about telecom, they say in telecom, there are only jobs which are related to tower. So there are related to tower, or some kind of field jobs, or some kind of network operation jobs. That is not true. Every job what you can imagine in the software network, software companies, you can see those kind of job roles in telecom industry as well. Now telecom industry is hiring more cloud engineers, more developers compared to the other job roles what we are thinking of. So we need to have all these skills to get hired for those kind of job roles. Now, just to take an example, there is a huge skill gap globally. So I'm talking about some India news pieces here, but globally there is a huge skill gap in the telecom world. India will need 22 million 5G backed skilled manpower by 2025. This news comes from TSSC, Telecom Sector Skill Council, and this was a recent news by talent demand of over 1.5 lakh in 5G. New age tech roles, demand supply gap is 28%. That means we have 28% more demand than the supply. If companies are going out and hiring, say they want to hire 100 people, they are not even getting 50 people. They are struggling to hire people. The salaries has skyrocketed. So the companies are struggling to hire talented resources. And unfortunately, these skills, these roles, or I'll say these different kind of skills are not available under the same umbrella. So some companies, they need people for telecom, development, cloud, and a number of other things. And unfortunately, those kind of skills are not available in the market, right? So that's a quick, understanding of this particular session, this particular topics, right? We are open for question. Karthikeyan, open to you. How do we really move forward on this? Karthikeyan, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Sanjay. Am I audible?
I'm done with my session. So what next?
Yes, am I audible, right?
Yes, we can. I can hear
Yeah,
you.
great. So like we have few questions on the chat box actually.
Mhm.
So I'll just read out the question. You can actually take it forward. And by the way, guys, feel free to drop all your questions on the chat box. Okay. So we are at the end of the session almost. All right. So that we can help you in solving all your doubts and queries. Okay. So I just go with few questions, Mr. Sanjay. All right.
Mhm.
Yes. So the first question is from Abhishek. So please suggest a good book to understand 5G RAN protocols.
Okay. So Abhishek, so if you see, there is a book called as 5G NR in Bullets. That is something what I refer. Frankly speaking, I'm not a radio expert. I majorly come from the core network background, right? But this 5G NR in Bullets, that's what we use, right? So that's what we use. There are a lot many other books, so I can't really name one book. So I read different things from different books, right?
Great. So next question is from Basava. So, sir, what is the difference between 5G and NR and 4G LTE?
Okay, so this is more on the radio network side of it. So what we do is the typical technology in 4G we used to call it. In 4G we used to call it as LTE, and in 5G we call it as NR. That is just the difference of name. But when it comes to the how they're implemented, their network architecture, their logical channels, their bandwidth supported. For example, LTE support used to support 100 megahertz in LTE Advanced. However, NR supports FR1 and FR2, right? And this can go up to maybe some higher bandwidth. This can go up to higher bandwidth. So there are a lot of flexibility. There are a lot of flexibilities in the spectrum allocation. A lot of flexibility when it comes to the resource allocation, the next age kind of services. So there are a lot of changes compared to LTE in 5G NR. That's a short answer here. We can talk about more detail in some future sessions.
Great. So next question is regarding, so sir, whether IoT will provide internet traffic?
So whether IoT will provide internet traffic. So it's a, let me put it this way. So IoT is not required to provide internet traffic. Let me put it this way. So AWS, or no, sorry, not AWS, some other question on AWS. So IoT is a device which has to be connected to internet. Now, what we want these devices to get connected to internet and do some kind of things with those devices. So some kind of sensor, some kind of actuators. So either I will sense something, send it to the central server, run some kind of AI engine there, come back with some actionable insight, and then run some actuators, run some actuators to do some task. So basically, it is a complete value chain what we need to look at it instead of just thinking about a device connecting to internet. So we have sensors, we have some hubs or some kind of aggregators of those sensors, connecting to the internet pipes, going to the cloud, doing some kind of applications, and providing those insights back to the devices or maybe some end users. For example, if I have a light which can be controlled from a far location, so what I can do is I can see an application on my mobile, and that I can use to do some kind of on and off that will typically run some action on the devices. So it is complete value chain what we need to think of instead of just thinking about providing this connectivity to the internet. So we have to think about end-to-end use cases when we talk about IoT. Just looking at one component will not solve the purpose. Right. Any other
Yes,
question,
great.
Karthik?
Yeah, next question is from Nasra. So will there be any relation between 5G and Wi-Fi?
Yeah. So there are a lot of relations. So there are a lot of interdependency on 5G. We typically call it as LWA, LAA. We used to talk about all these things in 4G, LTE wireless, and LTE license assisted access and all those things. We are going to have a lot of different things. We are going to have a lot of different things with the 5G and NR. So sorry, 5G and Wi-Fi. 5G and Wi-Fi, and we have some special mechanism. There is something called as ATSS, which can steer your traffic, which can split your traffic, which can even switch your traffic. That means the Wi-Fi can be working like a support for their wireless network, where you can split the traffic between 5G and Wi-Fi. You can switch this traffic, you can steer this traffic from 5G to Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi to 5G. So there is a lot of interworking is going to happen between 5G and Wi-Fi, and this is just started. It will be going on a different world altogether. Lot of interworking between 5G and Wi-Fi. Karthikeyan, next question.
Yeah. So from Ronak, so slicing in common word in one line.
Yeah. So slicing is a logical isolation of one physical network, where all those logical sections of the network are having completely independent from each other and providing different type of key performance indicators. That's the simplest definition what I can have of 5G network slicing.
Yes. So next question is from Rohan. So what is the difference between CRAN and ORAN?
Okay, CRAN is Cloud RAN, ORAN is Open RAN. CRAN is typically about moving some of the components to the cloud. ORAN is more about some interfaces between RU and DU, which is typically called as mid-haul or as the front haul. So some kind of different interfaces. ORAN is typically steered by an organization called as ORAN Alliance, and also supported by a body called as TIP, Telecom Infra Project, which is founded by Meta. Right? So CRAN may not be Open RAN, but Open RAN is a part of Open RAN is always deployed on the cloud infrastructure.
Great.
Yeah, Karthikeyan, next question.
Yeah. So next question is from Anjul. So Sanjay sir, which technology need to learn IoT or DevOps?
Okay. So if you see, IoT is not one technology. It is an end-to-end kind of use cases where you need to learn multiple components. When I talk about DevOps, DevOps is mainly related to some kind of development and operations of the IT application, IT infrastructure. So they are both two different things. But if you talk about the demand today, there is a demand for both. There is a demand for IoT end-to-end use cases and services, as well as DevOps. So there is a huge requirement which we have on both the fronts, IoT as well as DevOps.
Great. So next question is from Neeraj.
So I think there are a lot of questions which are coming to my inbox as well.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
No, very difficult to read all these messages. One question I'm taking from, okay. So Nayan says cost of running infra in public cloud is going to be higher. So for sure, cloud is not cheap. Cloud is going to be way more costly than your data center. However, the initial deployment, when you want to really get started, you can get started with some kind of public cloud. But if you look at workloads, long-term workloads, and the heavy workloads, what we are talking about in 5G are not going to be cheap in the AWS cloud or in any public cloud for that matter. Sir, I am from electrical branch. Sir, if I have good commands in programming, then surely I get jobs in IT tech companies. Yes, you can get, right, Khushi, because electrical is one branch what you study about. We typically call it circuit branches. But if you have good command in programming language, you can surely get a job in IT tech or telecom companies. How does 5G take revolution in this era? So Salil, 5G is going to, Sai, it was not Salila, it's Sai. 5G is going to change the world the way we used to have, the way we used to imagine our use cases. Nowadays, almost every industry, every device, every office, smart homes, smart factories, they are all getting connected to internet. And that is going to change the way we used to think about wireless network. How will 5G latency will be lower if processing is being done in the cloud? So Ajmat, again, as I mentioned, there is no thumb rule to design your 5G network. 5G network will be designed based on the use cases. If you want lower latency, you have to bring application closer to the end user, and then only you will get lower latency. So there is no standard design for 5G network. 5G network has to be designed depending on the requirement of the use cases. Right. So I think that's all. We have got a lot of questions. I may not be able to answer. I have another maybe 50, 60 questions, right? So Karthik, I think we can, just drop our email address, our support email address,
Yeah.
and then maybe we can, we can just take those questions at a later stage.
Yeah, great. So guys, I'll just drop a feedback form in your chat box in a while. Okay. So make sure you're filling up that particular feedback form with all the right details, guys. Okay. And Mr. Sanjay, do you feel like showing the program what we have here in
Yeah.
Skill-Lync?
So,
Yes.
so what happened when we talk about all these things, right? I talked about a challenge, right? So there are, there are multiple different kind of skills which are required today to stay relevant in the market. It may be for freshers, it may be for the experienced people, but what we need to do here is we need to understand all these things. So keeping this in mind, we at Skill-Lync have designed a postgraduate program in 5G network design and development. So what is so special about this program? Maybe you have seen a lot of 5G programs which are available in the market, but what is different about this program? First of all, this can help you to apply for a variety of roles like R&D engineers, network engineers, protocol development, and testing engineers. And it will also help you to pursue higher education in wireless communication and 4G, 5G, 6G technologies. So just to take an example, currently the Oulu University in Finland have started working on 6G research. If you want to study there, having good understanding of 5G is going to help you with this. Now, when we have this kind of sessions, they are not only theoretical sessions, we have multiple different levels of learning. We will talk about it, right? But we are also helping you to deploy some of the 5G network using open source tools like Wireshark, Free 5GC, UE Ransim, Open Air Interface. So we have a lot of projects with our learning. Now, keeping this in mind, we have divided our course into 3 tracks. The first track is 5G NR and Open RAN. Another track where we talk about telco, cloud, and 5G core, and another track where we talk about 5G protocol development testing. So depending on the job role, what you want to get into, there can be somebody who is comfortable with programming, developing, they can go with this track. If you're not, you can also choose some of these tracks, right? So we have different tracks, but this can give you a complete end-to-end coverage for the 5G networks, which are going to be required in the future generation of networks. All these learnings, they are also associated with lot of projects. So we have, for every course what we have got a lot of industry projects which are available. And when you want to complete these courses, you have to complete these projects, and then only you will be certified on this particular course. Now, a couple of other things, just wanted to have a quick overview how our courses looks like. So this is how our dashboard looks like. So you have a lot of different courses. In this dashboard, you can see there are a lot of different courses, and all those courses are associated with a lot of videos. So there are a lot of video content which is available for lifetime access. And if you are, in addition to these video sessions, we will have weekly live sessions on certain topics, which will be communicated to you in advance. If you're not able to attend it, that is also okay, because you will be getting the recording of those live sessions on your LMS. If you're not able to understand anything, if you're not able to complete any project, you can either create a ticket, or you can also request for a mentoring one-to-one session. So when you click on request on a mentoring session, you can choose which course you are looking at, what are the session type, what is the date, what is the duration you're looking for, and you also need to write for which particular topic you are looking for that session. So what we will do is we will assign one of the subject matter expert, and he will be available to take your questions and answer those questions. Right now,